When I first got my hands on the new M5 iPad Pro, I couldn't fully test it. It is so much like the now year-and-a-half-old M4 iPad Pro that the only real difference is that M5 processor. And the apps that could really push that processor all had yet to be updated to really take advantage of the overhead this new processor provides. But now I have felt its full power. And it's fine. This is Brad. He likes to review the tech. He also likes to draw, and this here is his theme song. The cringy theme songs will continue until every last one of you has hit subscribe. The iPad that I have here is the 1TB model. That is a good amount of storage for an iPad. But what about keeping all of that work that you created on that iPad backed up? That is crazy easy to do if you have the right equipment. And that's where today's sponsor, Ugreen, comes in, and the new NASync DH2300. Inside this nice enclosure is space for 2 hard drives. Think of this as your own personal cloud storage, except there's no monthly cost associated and you never have to worry about your privacy. I've known about NAS storage for a long time as a guy who works with a lot of video files. I've always treated these as like time machine backups for my Mac that are redundant so that if one hard drive fails or stops working, there's a second one running to keep my files backed up and I won't lose anything. But what really impressed me about Ugreen is how many apps that this thing comes with. You could literally turn this into an iCloud or a Google photo replacement, backing up all your photos, all your videos, and it's just as easy to use as iCloud. I can give permission to family members so they can do the same thing with their photos and videos, and it was crazy easy to set up. It connects quickly using your phone via NFC. And now my family and I can share all of our files across iOS, Android, Macs, and PCs. And I've seen people using these devices for all sorts of crazy things. In-home video servers, a home music streaming server. The software that they pack in makes those sort of things super easy. I have 8 terabytes of storage here right now, but this thing can go all the way up to 60 terabytes. That's 20 million pictures. 40,000 movies. You connect it to your network using the 1 gigabyte networking port along the back, and that lets me transfer files at 1 gigabyte a second. I'm able to transfer my files a lot faster here than I can on iCloud or with Google. Click on my link down below in the description, get 20% off. Now this is their Black Friday deal, but you can get it right now, early, just for you. So why go with the iPad Pro? What is it about this iPad that makes it Apple's best iPad? For me, there are 2 reasons to go with the Pro: the processor and the screen. The M5 is a step up from the M4. As expected, it's not a huge bump. But if you have an iPad that's several years old, maybe it's an M1, one of the older A-series iPad Pros, and you're ready for an upgrade, it makes sense to get the latest and greatest. But what I think is the best new feature of the M5 processor is how the base level of RAM has gone from 8 gigabytes to 12 gigabytes. 4 gigabytes of RAM does not sound like much, but in some of the creative apps like Procreate, Clip Studio, ZBrush, it can make a real difference, especially if you're working with really big files. The 1 and 2 terabyte configurations of the iPad Pro come with 16 gigabytes of RAM, same as the last generation. So in Procreate, I was getting 222 layers when making a new canvas, the resolution of the screen. And since I don't have the 12 gigabyte model to test, I can't give you the exact number, but I know how math works, so I could give you a good estimate. Because on my M4 iPad with 8 gigabytes of RAM, I was getting 180 layers, so I would expect a little over 200 layers on the 12 gigabyte model using this resolution. But what makes this a tool for pros, and why I would recommend this for pros as opposed to the iPad Air, is if you're a pro who is working with really big resolutions. Maybe you're illustrating for print. Maybe you're creating artwork for 8K video. Because when we get a really big canvas like that 8K size, 7,680 pixels by 4,320 pixels, I was only getting 27 layers to work with on my M4 with 8 gigabytes of RAM. On this iPad with 16 gigabytes of RAM with the same file size, I get 52 layers, almost twice as many. But now if you go with the base level, you're going to get 42 layers at that size. And if you're dealing with those really high resolution files, that's going to come in handy. And that's going to apply to all apps that are really RAM dependent, like ZBrush, like Clip Studio. Clip Studio does not actually contain how many layers you can get. It will just crash when it runs out of RAM. That's all. I should say it doesn't crash often. I don't use file sizes that big, but you know, it does. It also comes in handy when you're dealing with animation. So if you're doing little animations in Procreate, the more layers you have, the longer your animation could be, the more you can do there. Also in something like Procreate Dreams, it's just gonna be more performant. And that's the thing with this M5 iPad. In any app in the Apple App Store, it is absolutely going to run amazingly on this iPad. But if I'm being honest, any app in the App Store is going to run crazy good on that last model, that M4 model, or heck, even the M3 iPad Air. Processing power is just rarely the bottleneck on iPads. And really, there's only a handful of apps on the iPad where RAM is the bottleneck. But for those apps, 12 gigabytes is a nice upgrade. The second thing that makes this iPad a Pro is that screen. It's an OLED display. It's actually what they call a Tandem OLED display. It takes two OLEDs and mushes them together magically, or maybe using some technology I don't understand. And the end result is that it makes this screen much, much brighter. And it is an impressive effect, especially outside in sunlight. This Tandem OLED is not new to this iPad. It debuted on last year's iPad, but I think this is still the star of the show. It is absolutely one of the most beautiful screens I have ever looked at anywhere. In fact, in my hands-on preview, I told you to go download the Assassin's Creed game if you get one of these iPads, just to see how the HDR looks in a game, because it looks that good. Apple does sell a matte version of this display with higher storage configurations. They call it Nano textured glass. I did not test that this year, but I did get some hands-on time with it last year, and I have mixed feelings. They're not that mixed. Overall, I thought it was pretty good. Where my feelings do start to mix is that if you want to get that nano texture on an 11-inch iPad, you have to pay at least $1,700. And that's before the Apple Pencil or any other accessories. Just to get that option, it's only available on the 1 terabyte and up configurations. And on the 13-inch iPad Pro, you have to spend $1,900 to get that texture. That's a lot. It's just a lot of money for an iPad. My initial impressions when looking at that screen is, as far as matte finishes go, this is a really, really good one. Like, really good. A lot of the matte finishes that I see, and I see a lot of them on drawing tablets, do dull the colors. And especially on an OLED screen, they take away a lot of that punchiness. They take away, like, the deepest blacks. And in other cases, where maybe it's not the highest end matte texture, you're getting light refracting going on. So you're getting, like, little RGB colored specks all over the texture, and that drives a lot of people nuts. This does not do that. It's a really smooth, consistent matte finish. And using it outside, oh my gosh, using it outside, it is legit the best outside screen I have ever seen once you get that nano texture on there. It gets bright enough so that you can see it outside really well, and also there is no glare even in direct sunlight. It is crazy good. It's almost magic. You can legit get work done on that thing without having to hide in the shade. But I was interested in the texture for drawing, and that's where I thought it was only okay. Since it's such a highly polished matte, you don't get a lot of grit to it, and that grittiness is what slows down the Apple Pencil tip when you're drawing and gives you more control. You do get some control with this. It's better than just the smooth glass screen, but it's just not a ton. It's not as much as you'd get on a matte screen protector. Now, in the year or so since my review, I have been gobbling up other artists' takes on this matte screen, and many of them love that and have made some really good points because they've been using it long term. If you are thinking about splurging for that high-end feature, definitely check out what Chris Piasek or Bardot Brush have to say about it. Their videos are just perfect. If I remember, I will link those videos down below in the description. If I forget, be really mean to me in the comments. The meaner you are, the faster I'll remember. But the general take of those is that it's better than drawing on smooth glass, and it looks way better than the matte texture screen protectors out there. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, in my initial review, I was worried about the durability of the nano texture display, and I was very careful in that review. I did not say that it would scratch if you use the Apple Pencil on it or if you use the wrong cloth on it, but because of a warning that Apple put with its cleaning cloth about not using any other cleaning cloths in case it might actually destroy the display or hurt the display in some way, I kind of put that up there as a caution flag because you're drawing on this thing all the time, and I was worried about watching other people's videos on the nano texture and how it has held up after a year or so. it sounds like it's really rugged and it's kicking butt. So yay! But for me, I thought it was just way too much money to spend on this one specific feature. Also, around this time, I discovered these screen protectors that you can take on and off, and that solved a lot of the problems for me in terms of drawing and getting the texture I was looking for. Those things kind of give me the best of both worlds. If I'm drawing, I can put it on and I have the control that I'm looking for, but if I want that beautiful punchy screen for watching content or just looking at my artwork and seeing it the way I want to see it, I can just take it off and look at the screen. It seems like a win-win, and it is a lot cheaper. The downside of those is they get dirty and gross really quickly. So the screen and the processor aren't the only two pro-level features that Apple is putting in here. This iPad now supports Wi-Fi 7. It supports external displays up to 6K at 60 Hz and 4K at 120 Hz. The storage speed is faster with 2 times the read-write speed as before. That's great if you're going to be doing video editing on this thing. And the iPad Pro now supports fast charging. You can charge the battery about halfway in about a half hour, and I actually tested this, and yep, that's about right. Mine was a little below half charge after a half hour, but also in the time that I was testing it, I also kept toggling it on and off to check canvas sizes and Procreate, so I probably screwed up my own battery test. After I hit that half hour mark, I decided to let it charge for another half hour, a full hour, and it was about almost 80% in that time. One of the more common comments that I've seen on iPad videos, especially the iPad Pro videos, are, is this a laptop replacement yet? And for most creators, I would say no. But iPad OS 26 is another step in that direction. On its own, I don't use the windowing features too much on the iPad. On 13 inches, I'm really only looking at 2 apps at once. Things feel a little bit crowded on that 13-inch display. But when I attach this to an external monitor, that's where it really shines, and that's where these features are really pretty cool. Apple's been adding features to its Files apps and other apps that they're in control of to also make it more desktop-like and make it far more usable, like a new open with feature instead of having to go to the share menu. But how well this works is going to depend on the apps that you rely on most, and if the people who are making those apps implement some of these features themselves. I think when a lot of creatives look at the iPad, they think that is cool, but it is hard justifying spending $1,600 plus on a MacBook and $1,000 plus on an iPad. Especially because they're using the same dang chips! So I get where people are coming from when they look at an iPad and they think, just let me run Mac OS and run the Adobe suite, or run the Affinity suite, or vice versa. A lot of the creators I know aren't against investing good money to get good tools, but what they see here are 2 very expensive tools that are kind of overlapping a lot, and they wish they could just combine it into one. For me, I still think the iPad is a companion device. That's how I use it. I use it for drawing or note-taking, various other tasks that it's specialized in, and it does those well. And if I was not reviewing these things and getting the latest and greatest tech into my office all the time, I don't think I'd go with the Pro. I don't need that many layers in Procreate. I don't need that extra RAM. I do really, really like this 13-inch screen. That screen real estate is really important to me. But now I can get that on an iPad Air and save some money. There are some trade-offs there, but that M3 processor, still really, really good. I am going back to a 60 Hz non-OLED screen. I would miss that, but I don't need it. The iPad Air screen still looks really good. And since I'm not working with huge canvas sizes, I don't need that many layers. Now on to the Apple Pencil Pro. This is another big addition from last year that's making its return this year unchanged. There were some cool features here that Apple added to the Pencil last year. The first is the barrel. When you squeeze the barrel of the Apple Pencil, in some apps you get a context-sensitive menu. What it does changes on an app-by-app basis. Like in the Notes app, it brings up different tools. It does something similar in Procreate. Also works when you're taking screenshots. It can bring up tools to mark things up in there. I actually ended up turning that off because I kept accidentally squeezing the barrel. For the apps I'm using, I just didn't need that context-sensitive menu. But one thing I do enjoy, also I don't use it a lot, but I think it's really cool, is the barrel rotation on some brushes in drawing apps. If you're drawing, you can rotate your pencil in real time, and it will rotate the brush as if you're rotating a real paintbrush as you're painting. One thing to note about this Apple Pencil Pro is that the naming is starting to get a little bit confusing. The only pencil that works with this iPad Pro is the newest one, the Apple Pencil Pro. If you have a Gen 2 Apple Pencil that you're maybe hoping to kind of take from your old iPad when you upgrade and use it here, it won't work. I think the reason that they changed up the Apple Pencil last year was to accommodate the camera position. On older iPads, the camera was on the top in portrait view. Now they've moved it to the top on landscape view, which makes a lot of sense. That camera is now right where the pencil charging mechanism used to be, so they had to rework where the pencil charger was on the iPad and also where it was located on the pencil. They did this when they redesigned the iPad Air as well. It also uses the newer Apple Pencil Pro. Now, apart from the charging and the barrel roll, this is the same drawing feeling as the older pens, and that's a really good thing. It already works super well, so just keep doing what you're doing, Apple. Now, since this iPad is the same design as last year's, all of our accessories work perfectly fine. I'm a fan of this philosophy. Samsung is always slightly changing up the position or the dimension of the cameras on the back of the Galaxy tabs, so last year's accessories no longer line up with the new Galaxy tab. Kinda drives me nuts. And I am a big fan of this Magic Keyboard cover. They redesigned this last year too. It's more substantial than the older ones, and you'd think, why are you making it thicker? But I think it works. Has a nice aluminum finish. The keys are surprisingly clicky for how thin this thing is. It does kind of double the weight of your super thin iPad, but that's all right. It makes it feel much more like a laptop. I also like that all of the Apple accessories are connecting magnetically. If I want to use this iPad as an iPad to read comics or play a video game or watch videos, I can easily just pull it off magnetically and put it into the folio case. Or I can go crazy and use it unprotected. The folio case itself is simple but functional. You could set it up at a good drawing angle or set it up at a good viewing angle. They have made the back flap slidable. I don't know if that's the right word, but basically you can just adjust that standing position just a tiny bit with the magnets. So if you want it to stand up at almost 90 degrees, you can get it there. If you wanted it like 85 degrees, you can get it there. It's a small but welcome touch. Now, I mentioned this in my first impressions video, but I think it's worth saying again. You might want to get a better charger for this iPad. The one that comes in the box is the same 20-watt charger that iPads have been coming with for ages now. But this new iPad supports fast charging. Cool. But unfortunately, that 20-watt charger just isn't going to cut it. You're going to need something that can do 40 to 60 watts to really take advantage of the feature. When I was charging, I was getting a little over 50 watts out of my charger. My charger can go pretty fast. Apple sells a charger, but that's probably overpriced for what it is. Overall, this iPad Pro is definitely Apple's best iPad, but it's so similar to last year's. But the other thing that's really impressed me about the iPad lineup in recent years is how they're giving the iPad Air so much love and such great processors. That M3 processor in the Air is really good. When I look at the Samsung Galaxy Tab lineup, their highest end Galaxy Tabs have their best processors. Not quite as good as the M series processors, but pretty darn good. But when you go to their mid-tier FE edition, that processor drops substantially in quality. On the iPads, it's just a little step down to the Air. And for that reason, I think the iPad Air is a better choice for a lot of illustrators. I know it's not the dual OLED. I know it's not 120 hertz. For me, do I really need those things? Personally, I don't. They're really, really nice to have, sure. What I really need is a great Apple Pencil. It has that. What I really need is a nice looking screen with nice colors. It has that. What I really need is to save a little bit of money, and it lets me do that. But if you do need those extra layers, if you do need that extra horsepower, I guess if you do need that OLED screen, or just really want it, the iPad Pro is here for you, and it's a really, really great device. What do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.